Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. There's something eerily quiet about a house after a divorce. The same walls, the same creaky floors, the same family portraits hung slightly crooked on the staircase wall, but everything feels different. It's like someone took the volume knob of our lives and twisted it all the way down, leaving only the faint hum of memory behind. We signed the papers in October of 2024, a final stroke of ink severing 12 years of marriage, love, children, and chaos. It had already been a slow death by that point. We'd separated in April, and I thought I had already done the grieving. I thought wrong. Grief doesn't hit like a freight train, it's more like a drip, drip, drip that soaks your life until everything feels damp and heavy. Her name is Amanda. We met in our mid-20s when she was in nursing school and I was teaching high school history. She was electric back then, funny, assertive, ambitious. She talked about opening her own clinic one day, somewhere quiet but meaningful, where she could actually help people who needed it. And she did help people, for a long time. She became a nurse practitioner, landed a stable position with the state, and was pulling in enough money to cover more than her half of the bills. It was a good life, it felt safe. That's what made the unraveling so terrifying. Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment things started to shift. It wasn't sudden, it never is. Maybe it was after our second child was born. The postpartum hit her hard that time, but it didn't look like sadness, it looked like restlessness, like packing, like disappearing for hours without telling me where she was, like going to bed at 4 a.m. and waking up to chaos. I tried to hold everything together. I really did. I juggled the kids, picked up extra shifts at school, cooked, cleaned, did the dance of pretending everything was fine. Because God help me, I thought if I pretended hard enough, it might actually become true. But things kept spiraling. She became unpredictable, emotionally volatile. One minute she was making pancakes with our son, the next she was locking herself in the bedroom and sobbing uncontrollably. I started walking on eggshells, so often I forgot what solid ground felt like. Then the diagnosis came: bipolar disorder. It explained a lot, but it didn't fix anything. There were medications, some worked for a while, others made her worse. She hated how they dulled her. "I feel like a ghost," she told me once, clutching her knees to her chest on the couch. "Like I'm here but not really living." She went off them more than once, each time promising it would be different. It never was. I held on, for the kids, for her, for the life we'd built. Until I couldn't anymore. The final straw came in the form of a phone call. It was a Friday evening. I was home with the kids. I was folding laundry while the baby played on the floor and our oldest watched cartoons. Amanda had taken them out for dinner and texted to say she'd drop them off around 8. It was 8:15 when the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. It was the police. She'd been pulled over for a DUI, with both our children in the car. I remember exactly where I was standing when the call came through, my left hand resting on a half-folded hoodie. The floor cluttered with clean socks and onesies, the baby babbling nonsense beside me. I answered the unknown number, expecting some political robocall or a wrong number. Instead, I heard, "Mr. Williams, this is Officer Brennan with the state police. We need to speak to you regarding your wife, Amanda." I froze. Every movie cliché about time slowing down, yeah, they're real. He explained, calm, efficient, like he'd done this hundreds of times. Amanda had been pulled over at a traffic stop. Her breath smelled of alcohol, slurred speech, red eyes, the whole checklist. But the most important part, the gut punch, was this: your children were in the back seat. I couldn't speak, just nodded like he could see me. He told me where they were holding her, where the kids were, what time I could pick them up. I still don't know how I got to the station. I left the laundry right there, half folded, tossed shoes on without socks, didn't even grab a jacket, I just drove. The kids were sitting on a bench, still wearing their coats. My daughter, only 3 years old, looked dazed. My son, 8 and old enough to understand too much, wouldn't look me in the eye. "She was crying," he said quietly, "and yelling at the policeman." I knelt down, hugged them both, told them they were safe. I lied, I didn't feel safe at all. Amanda was processed and released within a few hours. I didn't go see her. I couldn't, I was too angry, too broken. I just took the kids home and tucked them into bed without saying much. My daughter asked if Mommy was okay. I told her Mommy wasn't feeling well. That was the last time I lied for Amanda. The next morning I called my lawyer. It wasn't about revenge, it wasn't about punishing her, it was about protecting the kids. We amended the custody agreement. What was once 60-40 in her favor became 70-30 in mine. I had full legal custody. She'd get supervised visitation until the court said otherwise. Amanda lost her license to practice medicine that same week. Once the board got wind of her arrest and the forged prescription investigation from months before, her career was over. Just like that. From nurse practitioner to barely employable. I found out later she was picking up hours at a diner, sometimes cleaning houses, driving DoorDash when she could. It wasn't enough to pay her rent. Child support checks started bouncing. She said she'd figure it out. But figuring it out never came. And the kids, they felt it. You think kids don't notice, but they do. My son started biting his nails until they bled. My daughter stopped sleeping through the night. She'd cry and ask if mommy was coming back. And I just kept folding laundry, cooking dinners, brushing tiny teeth, and carrying a sadness I couldn't explain. You don't realize how thin your version of normal is until it's tested, stretched like an old rubber band, frayed at the edges. I was operating in survival mode for months. Wake up, make breakfast, pack school lunches, work, answer questions, keep my voice calm, don't fall apart. There were days I'd look around the house after the kids went to bed and wonder, how did I get here? And I don't mean that in the dramatic sense, not like I was questioning fatherhood or resenting my situation. I love my children more than I thought possible. They are my reason. But there were quiet moments when the dishwasher hummed or the TV played faintly in the other room when I'd just sit and think, this isn't what I pictured. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Amanda and I had plans, we had stability. She had a respectable job, I had mine. We had a rhythm, a house with steady laughter and grocery lists on the fridge. Now I was rationing money while Amanda spiraled further down. Every now and then she'd show up to pick the kids up late. One time she forgot it was even her weekend. Another time she called me crying from a bus stop because her car had broken down. Still, I tried to keep things civil, not for her but for them. Because despite everything, despite the hurt and the fear and the sleepless nights, I didn't want them to hate their mother. I wanted them to see her for who she was, a deeply flawed, struggling human being, not a villain. I wanted them to understand one day that sometimes people just fall apart. And when they do, it's not always easy to put the pieces back together. But even that perspective came at a cost. Like the night my daughter had a stomach bug and Amanda was supposed to pick them up. I called her and said it might be better to wait a day. She got defensive, accused me of keeping the kids from her, of trying to poison them against her. That was the night I realized how unwell she truly was. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder around that time. The doctors confirmed what I'd been suspecting for years. It gave everything a name: the mood swings, the erratic behavior, the disappearing acts, the bursts of irrational anger followed by tearful apologies. At least now I had something to work with. But a diagnosis doesn't fix things. It's not a magic wand, it's a mirror, and Amanda wasn't ready to look into it. She started missing therapy, ignored medication, said the doctors didn't understand her. And when the child support order came due, when the courts asked her to contribute something, she lost it. Her calls became more erratic. At one point, she accused me of trying to bankrupt her. Another time, she said I'd manipulated the entire system to make her look like a bad mother. I wanted to scream, Amanda, you forged prescriptions. You drove drunk. I didn't do that, you did. But I never said those words out loud, not to her, not in front of the kids. I swallowed them over and over again until the silence tasted bitter. It became my full-time job to protect my children from the emotional wreckage their mother left behind. And still they loved her. Unconditionally, innocently, they'd draw her pictures and ask when they'd see her again. They never forgot her, never stopped hopping. Sometimes I wish I had that kind of grace. It was a Tuesday evening, one of those dull, forgettable weeknights when everything should feel routine. I was unloading groceries from the trunk when my phone buzzed. It was Amanda. I hesitated before answering. Calls from her always gave me a physical reaction, a twist in my gut, a flash of adrenaline. I never knew if it would be a calm conversation or a storm. This time it was neither, just quiet desperation. Hey, she said, her voice shaky, I don't have any food for the kids. I paused. What do you mean? I mean, there's nothing in the house. I was going to go shopping but my card got declined again and I don't get paid until Friday and... She trailed off and I could hear the sound of her trying not to cry. I didn't lecture her, I didn't ask how she'd ended up there again, I just told her I'd bring something by. In the freezer I had a frozen pizza. I grabbed a bag of carrots, some apples, a container of hummus, not a full meal but enough for now. I drove over, dropped it off, and left without stepping inside. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for 15 minutes just staring at the dashboard. I felt numb. Because this makeshift solution, this wasn't parenting. This was patchwork. This was me duct tapping together a situation I didn't create. And yet, I couldn't let them go hungry. I couldn't let my kids sit in a cold apartment with empty cabinets just because their mom couldn't get her life together. But something about that night stuck with me more than the others. Maybe it was the way she looked when she opened the door, worn down, hair unwashed, eyes hollow. Maybe it was the smell of cigarette smoke clinging to her hoodie. Or maybe it was just the simple, brutal truth. She wasn't capable of caring for them, not even for a day. That's when it hit me. I had to start thinking differently. I had to stop hoping she'd bounce back. I had to stop making decisions as if she was going to return to who she used to be. Because she wasn't coming back. That woman, the nurse practitioner who used to bring home takeout after long shifts and read bedtime stories to our oldest, she was gone. What was left was someone fragmented, someone I didn't recognize, someone who could barely feed herself, let alone her kids. I started keeping extra food in the car. Just in case. I taught the kids how to pack simple lunches on their own, how to check expiration dates, how to microwave mac and cheese. They were 8 and 3, too young to carry that kind of responsibility, but I needed them to be prepared. I hated that. I hated the world for making me teach them that. But in a way, I think that was the moment I shifted from being a co-parent to being a sole parent, emotionally, practically, and, increasingly, legally. And once you cross that line, there's no going back. By early spring 2025, the cracks were no longer cracks, they were canyons. Amanda was unraveling faster than I could track. One day, she'd be upbeat and talking about getting back into school to maybe retrain as a medical assistant. 2 days later, I'd get a text that she'd missed a job interview because of a panic attack or that her phone had been shut off again. Her life was a cycle of 2-week hopes and 1-day collapses. And the worst part was, I kept trying to believe the hopeful version of her was the real one. That the Amanda I'd married, driven, funny, compassionate, was still in there somewhere, just stuck behind a fog of mental illness and addiction and bad choices. But one afternoon, that illusion died for good. It was a Wednesday. She was supposed to pick up the kids from school at 3:30, a simple drop-off day, part of our revised 30% split. I had an out-of-town meeting scheduled and had already pushed it twice because I didn't trust her. But this time she swore she'd be there, said she set alarms, wrote it on her calendar, even stuck a note on the fridge. 3:30 came, then 3:45, then 4:10. The school secretary called me and I could hear the judgment in her voice, even though she tried to keep it neutral. "Hi Mr. Cartwright, we still have Liam and Ava here. We couldn't reach your ex-wife. Are you able to pick them up?" I left my meeting mid-presentation, drove like a bat out of hell across town, picked them up, offered them snacks and reassurances, but inside I was burning. When I finally reached Amanda hours later, she told me she'd fallen asleep, but I could hear the slurring, I could hear the music in the background, and I knew. That wasn't a nap. That was a binge. That night, as I sat across the dinner table from my 2 tired, confused kids, Liam twirling his spaghetti, Ava humming a little song to herself, I made the decision. I would pursue full custody. Not 70-30, not we'll see how she's doing next month, not maybe she'll turn a corner, no more wishful thinking. Because this wasn't about Amanda anymore. It was about them, the 2 humans we brought into the world. The 2 people I loved more than anything, more than her, more than my job, more than my own damn comfort. I started documenting everything. Every missed pickup. Every late-night text. Every bounce child support payment. Every voicemail that didn't make sense. I opened a spreadsheet, printed call logs, began talking to a family lawyer who agreed to take on my case at a reduced rate because he believed in protecting the kids first. And somewhere in the middle of all this, in between court consultations and pediatrician appointments and bedtime routines, I finally admitted to myself that the Amanda I'd loved no longer existed. Maybe she never really had. Maybe I'd been in love with a version of her she couldn't sustain, the part of her that tried, that smiled through stress, that wanted a quiet life with a white picket fence. But under that there was something deeper, something fragile, something dangerous. And now I couldn't afford to romanticize it anymore. Not when my children were depending on me to keep their world from falling apart. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork, though there was plenty of that. It was walking into the courtroom and seeing Amanda across from me, thinner than I remembered, hair pulled into a messy bun, makeup smudged from either crying or forgetting she put it on. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She just stared straight ahead, clutching her coat like it was the last thread of dignity she had left. This wasn't a custody battle, not yet. It was a custody warning shot. My lawyer filed for an emergency custody review, citing Amanda's recent DUI, the missed school pickups, and her inability to maintain stable housing or income. The judge didn't rule on full custody yet, but he did what I hoped he would. He ordered a temporary suspension of unsupervised visits. That meant the kids would stay with me full-time until Amanda could show some form of progress, counseling, a job, anything resembling stability. I didn't celebrate, I didn't even breathe a sigh of relief. Because sitting on the other side of the courtroom was a woman who once kissed me in a rainstorm and made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs for our toddler, and now she was crumbling. After the hearing, she walked up to me outside the courthouse. I almost didn't recognize her voice. It was hoarse, low, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "You're really doing this, huh?" I paused, nodded. "For the kids, Amanda, not to punish you, never to punish you." She looked down at her shoes and then up at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, pain, yes, but also resentment, maybe even betrayal. "You think you're the only one who loves them," she snapped. "You think I don't miss them every damn day." "I know you do," I said quietly, "but loving them isn't enough, not anymore." She turned and walked away without another word. And just like that, a chapter closed, not with a scream but with a silence that stretched out and wrapped around both of us like a shroud. The house was quieter now, not because the kids were gone, they were still here more than ever, but because something had shifted in the atmosphere. There was no longer the buzzing anxiety of when are they going back, or will Amanda remember this pickup time. Now it was just us, me, the kids, and a long road ahead. I started noticing things I hadn't paid enough attention to before. My daughter, just 8 years old, had started double-checking the fridge every night before bed, asking if there would be lunch tomorrow. My son wouldn't take a shower without asking me to stand outside the door. At first, I thought it was just them adjusting to changes, but then it clicked. They didn't feel safe, not in the way kids should. One evening, I overheard them talking in whispers behind the bedroom door. "Do you think Mommy's still mad at us?" my son asked. "No," my daughter replied after a long pause. "She's just sick, like how Grandma was, but in her head." It gutted me. They were processing what adults around them had failed to handle with grace. They were stitching together meaning from fragments of overheard arguments, court conversations, and too many nights spent wondering why the car didn't come back up the driveway. So I sat them down. No legal terms, no blame, just truth gently told. "Mommy loves you," I said, "but sometimes adults go through really hard things, and when they do, it makes it harder for them to take care of other people, even the ones they love the most." They nodded. Not because they understood, but because they needed something to hold onto. After they went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the family photo we'd taken just 3 years ago at the zoo. Amanda had her arms around both kids, a rare candid smile lighting up her face. Now she barely returned texts. And when she did, they were often riddled with typos, excuses, or emotional guilt trips. "I just miss them so much. Do you even care how this feels for me?" Of course I cared, but not more than I cared about the kids eating a full meal, sleeping in a warm bed, and not waking up to sirens in the middle of the night. People around me, coworkers, old friends, even some family, asked why I didn't just go for full legal custody and end it once and for all. The truth. Because somewhere deep inside, I still hoped Amanda would pull herself together. Not for me. Not for us. But for them. Because even though she had broken every promise she'd ever made me, I didn't want the kids growing up believing their mother didn't try. It was early April when my daughter turned 9. She'd been planning her birthday for weeks, a small party in the backyard with her classmates, her favorite chocolate cake, and more importantly, a visit from Mom. Amanda had promised. She said she'd even bring a special gift she'd been saving up for. My daughter counted down the days. I had my doubts, but I kept them to myself. That morning, the weather was perfect, unseasonably warm with just enough breeze to keep the balloons from floating off. I set up a folding table with pizza boxes and snacks. The kids screamed and played in the yard. Parents chatted politely. Every few minutes, my daughter looked down the driveway. "She'll come," she said, more to herself than to me. By 4 p.m., the party was winding down. No sign of Amanda. My daughter stood by the fence with her arms crossed. I walked over and asked if she wanted to open her presents. She shook her head. Her eyes were wet but stubbornly unblinking. I just wanted her to be here. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pick up the phone and call Amanda and tell her exactly what she'd done, not just missed a party but missed the chance to remind her daughter she still mattered. But I didn't. I had a bigger responsibility in that moment, being present even when someone else was. I knelt down and said, "You're allowed to be sad, but you're not alone, okay? We're here, I'm here." She nodded and finally opened her gifts, smiling half-heartedly at the new art supplies from her aunt and the glittery backpack from her brother. But something had dimmed in her that day. A tiny light that used to flicker with hope that her mom might come through had burned out just a little more. Later that night, I texted Amanda. "You didn't show, she waited for you all day." I got a reply 2 hours later. "I'm sorry, I overslept and then my car wouldn't start. Tell her I love her." No picture, no call, not even a voicemail. I didn't show my daughter the message. I didn't want to pile another hollow excuse on top of the others. Instead, I sat with her while she drew in her new sketchbook, trying to capture the balloons before they wilted. That was the moment I started researching full custody. Not because I wanted to erase Amanda from their lives, but because I needed to protect my children from the kind of wounds that don't bleed but still scar. The kind where promises feel like lies. The kind where you learn, too early, not to count on the people who should never need a reminder to show up. That night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she whispered, "Maybe next year." And my heart broke again. Because I knew she still believed in her. And I wasn't sure I did. It was a Tuesday evening when I got the call. I was helping my son with his math homework, multiplication tables, something he found frustrating but doable with enough coaxing, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Is this Mr. Dalton?" "Yes, speaking." "This is Officer Hernandez with the county sheriff's office. I'm calling in regard to Amanda Taylor." My breath caught. "What happened?" "She was picked up this afternoon for shoplifting at a local grocery store. Your name is listed as an emergency contact for her children." Shoplifting, Amanda? I mean, yes, she'd struggled, but this, I asked if the kids were with her. "No, thankfully not, but she mentioned her custody arrangement and asked us to contact you in case this affects anything." I didn't know whether to thank him or scream. After we hung up, I stood there in the kitchen staring blankly at the phone while my son asked me how much 7 times 6 was. I couldn't answer. This wasn't just a missed birthday or a bad decision anymore. This was spiraling fast. Amanda's choices were no longer just inconvenient or disappointing, they were dangerous. Her ability to provide even the most basic safety and stability for our children was deteriorating, and now her name was in the system. The next day I spoke with my lawyer. Until that point, I had held back emotionally, legally, and financially because I didn't want to ignite a war. I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, Amanda would hit a low point and then start climbing back up. But now I wasn't so sure she even had the strength to recognize how far she'd fallen. The lawyer didn't hesitate. "You have grounds to petition for sole custody, full legal and physical." My heart ached as he said it, not because it wasn't the right thing, but because I never wanted this. I never wanted my kids to grow up with one parent officially erased from the custody order. I never wanted to sit across from them one day and say, "The courts decided your mom can't take care of you anymore." But how long was I supposed to wait? Until there was a car crash with the kids in the back. Until Amanda disappeared entirely. I didn't want my kids to carry her consequences. That night, after I put them to bed, I sat alone on the couch and pulled up old photos. Amanda on the beach with the baby strapped to her chest. Amanda singing to our daughter in the living room while braiding her hair. Amanda holding my hand in the hospital after our son was born. I missed that woman, the one I married, the one I built a life with. But she wasn't here anymore. And the woman she'd become, she couldn't be trusted to protect our children, and if I didn't act, I was just as much to blame. So I began preparing for the hearing. The courthouse was cold, not in temperature but in atmosphere, sterile, quiet, humming with tension like a pressure cooker waiting to go off. I sat on the bench outside the courtroom, dressed in a suit that suddenly felt too tight, too formal for something so heartbreakingly personal. Across from me sat Amanda, gaunt, hollow, her hair tied back messily, face blotchy from crying or maybe from the exhaustion that had long taken hold. She wouldn't look at me, and honestly I didn't want her to. She knew why we were there. I'd filed the motion for sole custody 2 weeks earlier. The shoplifting arrest was the final straw. I submitted everything: the DUI, the revoked medical license, her unstable employment, her absences, her text messages saying she had no money to feed the kids. I didn't want to bury her, but I also didn't want my children buried with her mistakes. She had a court-appointed lawyer, I had mine. Neither of us spoke in the hallway, though at one point Amanda looked up and for a flicker of a second I saw the woman I used to know. She looked defeated and terrified. The judge called our case at 9:47 a.m. Inside the courtroom it felt like time slowed. Everything was so quiet, even the scratching of pens against legal pads sounded too loud. My lawyer spoke first, calm, factual, clinical. Then Amanda's lawyer tried to push back. She's improving. She's seeking therapy. She wants to be a part of her children's lives. But the judge had seen too many broken promises, and so had I. Amanda was sworn in, her voice cracked as she answered each question. She admitted to relapsing, to making poor decisions, to not being there. At one point the judge asked her, "Do you believe your children are better off in your care than their father?" Amanda hesitated, then she shook her head. "No, Your Honor, not right now." It shattered me, not because I was glad but because I knew how hard that sentence must have been for her to say. That moment of clarity, humility, honesty, it was the first time in a long time that I felt Amanda was truly there, even if only briefly. The judge ruled that same morning. Sole physical and legal custody to me, supervised visitation rights to Amanda, contingent on stability, therapy, and sobriety, a follow-up review in 6 months. I thanked the judge. Amanda just nodded and wiped her eyes. As we left the courtroom, she walked ahead of me, small, broken, and alone. Outside, I sat in the car for what felt like an hour. The kids were at school, unaware of what had just happened. I imagined picking them up that afternoon, their backpacks swinging, faces bright, chattering about lunch and recess and math. They wouldn't know that the path ahead had just been rewritten for them, maybe for the better. But I knew. I knew the weight I had just taken on, not just as a father but as the parent, the only one who could be counted on, and I was ready. I didn't feel victorious, I felt hollow, relieved yes but not triumphant. Because no one wins in court when a parent fails. That night I tucked the kids in like always, kissed their foreheads, turned off the lights. And then I sat alone in the hallway, staring at the closed bedroom doors. I had done what was right, I had done what was needed. But that didn't make it easy. The days after the court ruling were a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief because the storm had passed, at least for now. There was no more waiting, no more sleepless nights wondering what Amanda would do next, whether the kids were safe, whether I'd get a last-minute call from the ER or the police. That constant low-grade panic had finally quieted. But grief, deep, unexpected grief, settled in like a fog. I didn't grieve the marriage, that ended a long time ago. I grieved the family I thought we could be. I grieved the version of Amanda I believed would rise from the ashes and co-parent with me. I even grieved the idea that my kids would grow up with 2 whole, present parents. Because no matter how much I tried to protect them from it, they'd one day ask the hard questions, and I'd have to answer. They deserved more than what they got. And while I had one custody, I felt like I had failed somewhere too, for not being able to shield them from her unraveling. I had to relearn how to live, now not as a co-parent but as the parent. Our days became tighter, more structured. Mornings started earlier to pack lunches and check homework. I learned how to braid hair thanks to YouTube. I figured out which brand of cereal they liked and which ones got soggy too fast. I started blocking out every Saturday just for us: mini adventures, library trips, movie nights in the living room. I became obsessed with keeping everything together, not out of fear this time, but from a fierce sense of responsibility. I knew that any cracks in the foundation now had to come from the outside. I couldn't afford to be the source of instability, not anymore. Amanda called once during the second week after court. She had been assigned a caseworker and wanted to let me know she was trying. I listened. I didn't say much. I told her I appreciated the update and that the kids were okay. That was the first time she didn't ask to talk to them. Maybe she knew she wasn't ready, maybe she knew I wasn't either. The kids were adjusting better than I expected. They didn't ask why they weren't seeing mom much. They seemed lighter, actually, more settled. I think children feel tension even if they don't have the language for it, and our house, for the first time in years, was finally quiet. One night, after brushing her teeth, my daughter hugged me extra tight and said, "You always make sure we're okay." That broke me. I didn't need the court to validate anything after that. I didn't need papers or rulings or custody percentages. I had what mattered. I had them. A year passed. Not quickly, slowly, in the way that healing demands. One morning at a time, one school drop-off, one scraped knee, one difficult bedtime meltdown, one moment of laughter that didn't feel weighed down by something else. Amanda showed up for her 6-month custody review. She had made some progress. She was in a sober living program and working part-time at a bookstore. She had been seeing a therapist. Her hair was clean, pulled back neatly. Her hands still trembled slightly when she signed papers, but her eyes met mine when she asked if she could see the kids more regularly. I said we'd take it slow. We started with phone calls, then supervised visits at the park, short, controlled bursts of time where I stood nearby, always watching but never interfering, letting them rebuild on their terms. The kids were cautious but curious. The older one asked more questions. The younger one just held her hand sometimes, as if trying to remember the shape of it. By summer, Amanda had managed 6 months of sobriety. I allowed her to take the kids to a library event alone for the first time. She was 20 minutes late bringing them back. That small slip triggered a panic I hadn't felt in months. I tried not to let it show, but I knew in my bones that trust wouldn't come easy. Not again, maybe not ever. Still, I didn't shut the door. Because while Amanda's presence was uncertain, my responsibility was, that had become clear. I no longer tried to figure out why she unraveled. I had stopped mourning the version of her I once knew. I no longer waited for her to come back to herself. I had accepted that sometimes people drift not because they want to hurt others, but because they've never truly known how to stay. And so I stayed. That became my silent promise to myself and to our children. To stay when others could not. To show up even when I didn't have all the answers. To offer safety, not just a house. To give them consistency, even in the face of chaos. I found peace in simplicity: Sunday pancakes, rainy day cartoons, the sound of small feet running down the hallway after bath time. Sometimes I still lie awake at night thinking about the whole journey. The woman I married, the collapse, the courts, the frozen pizza, the grief. But more than anything, I think about now. My home isn't perfect, I'm not perfect, but it's ours, it's safe, it's whole, even with missing pieces. And when my kids smile at me like they do, open, unguarded, trusting, I know what remains. Love, resilience, and the quiet, stubborn strength of a parent who simply refused to walk away.